At this point, it seems like nothing can stop the backwards compatibility train. With loads of new games being added on a regular basis and continued improvements being made to performance, it's nice to see Microsoft's efforts paying off. And now one of the most requested releases has finally been made available: Call of Duty Black Ops 2. Not only is Black Ops 2 one of the most successful games in the Call of Duty series, it's also the last major installment designed with previous generation consoles in mind. Sure, stripped-down versions of the more recent Call of Duty games, such as Ghost or Advanced Warfare, were released on these older machines, but Black Ops 2 was the grand finale for the series on Xbox 360 and other last-gen consoles. It also demonstrates how far we've come in terms of image quality expectations on consoles since its release. Black Ops 2 runs at 880 by 720 on Xbox 360, which is rather low, but at the same time, the game's high frame rate does help everything hold up better than you might expect. Now, it's not a stunning game by modern standards, mind you, but Treyarch was pushing the boundaries of its engine back in 2012 when it was first released. In addition to the 60 frames per second frame rate target, the development team introduced new water effects, improved lighting, and some other cool features into the mix. This scene where you're using a wingsuit to infiltrate an enemy compound still holds up beautifully today with an awesome sense of speed. This is perhaps the most technically demanding Call of Duty game of the last generation. And when talking consoles, it was the best on Xbox 360. The Wii U and PlayStation 3 versions just couldn't compete performance-wise, even when fully patched. But that doesn't mean it was perfect on Microsoft's system either. The performance on Xbox 360 could prove rather unstable at points, particularly in the campaign, which is where backwards compatibility steps in. At this point, most Xbox 360 games available on Xbox One now perform faster than they did on the original hardware. So how's it running then? Well, we're going to look at all three modes of the game here, including the campaign, competitive multiplayer, and of course zombies. But let's begin with the most demanding portion, the campaign. A defining trait of these single-player Call of Duty campaigns is the heavy reliance on alpha effects such as smoke and fire. Fittingly then, Black Ops 2 begins with the player watching this rather gruesome scene. No, I'm not talking about the guy in the truck, I'm talking about the frame rate. But once you stand up, things immediately improve and the majority of the battle ahead plays out at a mostly locked 60 frames per second, with a few hitches here and there. The overall sense is that it feels great to play, which is key. That said, there are still moments such as this, where the frame rate hangs just below the 60 frames per second line for an extended period of time. These scenes are few and far between for the most part, thankfully, but when it does crop up, you can definitely feel it. So how does it stack up against the Xbox 360 then? Well, have a look. The old 360 does a nice job of hitting its target here, with both consoles humming along at 60 frames per second in this scene, but it's not long before we start to see a couple of blips here and there. Unfortunately, just a few moments later then, this is followed by an extended bout of slowdown, with a small handful of torn frames along the top portion of the image. Jumping over to the next mission then, we see those new water effects giving the 360 a rough time, with a frame rate that hangs below 60 frames per second throughout this scene. Now, as we found in previous tests, GPU restricted scenes like this on 360 do tend to perform much faster on Xbox One, which is precisely what we're seeing here.
We need to move.
The rest of this mission then hums along nicely, with smooth performance throughout, even as you're blasting through the jungle and exploding trucks and whatnot. It feels great to play. It's a far cry from the Wii U version, which really struggled during any major action scene like this. Definitely not a great version of the game. Now, this next scene then runs a lot better on Xbox 360, but as you can see, there are still minor skips and hitches along the way, while Xbox One manages to power through without an issue. And while we're here, I want to point out that this scene still looks pretty awesome in motion. The rain effects combined with the dense foliage and the moody lighting, it all manages to hold up pretty well. And it gets better once you jump off and start flying then. There's a great sense of speed and momentum here, and the smooth frame rate helps keep the game feeling great. But this is basically what you can expect throughout the campaign then. The frame rate on Xbox 360 regularly drops below 60 frames per second with little bits of screen tearing here and there. But Xbox One manages to power through most of these scenes with little issue. It feels much better and the tearing is completely eliminated. That said, we haven't had time to replay the entire campaign, of course, so it's entirely possible that later demanding missions could see more severe performance dips. But based on our findings thus far, you can expect a frame rate that exceeds the original Xbox 360 version at all times. Of the 3 console releases, Black Ops 2 was already best on the 360, but thanks to backwards compatibility, the Xbox One has taken the crown. But clearly, most people playing Call of Duty today are not likely to replay the campaign, though it is quite good. No, it's all about the multiplayer. So we jumped online and played a few rounds just to get an idea of what you can expect. And one of the first things we encountered is the need to download the Nuketown map pack, which is required to play online. Thankfully, DLC management for 360 is well implemented on the Xbox One, and the process went very smoothly. Once downloaded then, we had no issues getting into a game. There are a lot of people still playing Black Ops 2 right now. Once in the game then, performance goes straight for 60 frames per second and it never lets go. No matter how many times I died, which was a lot, every match we managed to play delivered a near flawless level of performance. For all intents and purposes, the game is locked at 60 frames per second. Of course, it was already very smooth on Xbox 360 in multiplayer mode, but it's nice to see that on the Xbox One, even those rare drops appear to be eliminated. It's very smooth. And as a quick aside, I still maintain that the frame rate is one of the reasons why Call of Duty continues to be a success. Your average player may not understand what a frame rate is, but you hand them a controller and they will feel the difference, even if they don't know why. Considering that 35 of the top 50 selling games of all time also run at 60 frames per second, it's something to think about. Frame rate may just matter more than you think. Back on track then, we've established that the multiplayer is rock solid and the campaign is improved. But how about zombies? Treyarch's popular survival mode is still being played by thousands of people, and we had no trouble jumping into a nice 30-minute round. Performance is very similar to the multiplayer mode overall, with a nice stable 60 frames per second throughout most of the match. It's not perfect, however. When explosions or fire fill the screen, performance is taxed and we end up with a slight dip in frame rate that quickly dissipates. Thankfully, it's not really a big deal and tends to occur primarily when a zombie blows up in your face. The rest of the match though hums along at a smooth level of performance and feels great to play. It's exactly what you would hope for. Ultimately, the performance on Xbox One is excellent. It's the best performing console iteration of Black Ops 2, and it still plays great due to its high frame rate. If you have fond memories of the game and are looking to revisit any portion of it, and happen to own the game already, this is a great way to do so. Of course, you can get higher fidelity with the PC version, no doubt, but it's likely that the player base on Xbox 360 and Xbox One is going to be higher, so if you're itching to get into the multiplayer, this is probably the best way to play. But the most important takeaway here is the continued quality of the backwards compatibility feature on Xbox One. BLOPs 2 is just one more feather in its cap, another game that runs better than it could have on the original hardware. The big question here then is how this will fare when run on the Scorpio. Will the extra power help power through the slowdown that remains and deliver a completely locked 60 frames per second experience? That certainly seems possible, and we're eager to find out. But with that, we've reached the end of this video. If you enjoyed it, be sure to like, subscribe, and follow us on Twitter. And while you're at it, be sure to let us know which other backwards compatible games you'd like to see covered in the future. And until next time, this is John, signing off.